What happens when you film a military installation while on the federal property of the base? In this video, a lot. Stick around, I'll tell you all about it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2 of the arrest of Johnny 5-0 outside of Edwards Air Force Base. If you haven't seen the first video I did on this, covering the 2-part series uploaded by John Olson, also known as YouTube handle Johnny 5-0, you won't be missing out on too much. That video is mostly Mr. Olson trying to argue that his arrest, which we'll see in this video, is unlawful. In that video, I prove him wrong, and I'll do it again in this one. Now, to save on time, we're going to jump to 2 minutes and 50 seconds into Mr. Olson's video, in which he demonstrates that he has the right to film where he was filming, and he shows pictures of the Edwards Air Force Base static display on Google Images as examples of images that the police did not prohibit. It is important to note that there are laws prohibiting the filming of protected military installations, and for a breakdown of that, you can check out my video here. It is also important to note that Mr. Olson was on federal property at the time, and was therefore subject to 50 U.S.C. 797, also referred to as Section 21 of the 1950 Internal Security Act. This act allows the commanders of military installations to create and enforce security procedures on the federal property of the installation, which in the case of Edwards Air Force Base extends for several miles outside of the actual fence line. Keeping all this in mind, Edwards Air Force Base generally allows the filming and photographing of the static display, as long as the military installation isn't in the background. At 4 minutes and 40 seconds into the video, Olson shows paperwork with the charges against him. He claims he wasn't arrested, but was still charged. This is probably because, in the military, an arrest refers to a pre-trial detention. Essentially, when dealing with military law enforcement, if you are arrested, it's because you're about to see a judge. Usually a soldier is only apprehended and then released to their unit for the unit to deal with. And civilians are apprehended and then escorted off the installation. On his paperwork, it shows that he was charged with 18 U.S.C. 1382, which states that it's illegal for any person to enter the federal property of a military installation for a purpose prohibited by law. This establishes two things. One, that Mr. Olson was on federal land, and two, that his intention was to commit a crime while on that land. Olson then states that he was also charged with 18 U.S.C. 795, which protects a restricted, confidential, secret, or top secret military installation from the general dissemination of information for Executive Order 10104. From this, we can establish that the base has that protection and cannot by law be filmed. But wasn't he just there to film the static display? Can we really prove that his intent was to film the installation? Yes, we can prove that. At 12 minutes and 3 seconds into his video, you can see Mr. Olson has set up a camera pointed directly right at the ACP, the access control point of the installation. We know that it was on and filming because he posted footage of it in part 1, in violation of 18 U.S.C. 797, which prohibits the publication of photography taken of a military installation. Well done. He then cuts to the security forces arriving, and the filmers are immediately hostile. They also claim that the Air Force doesn't understand their oath to the Constitution. They also state, and I love this, that Staff Sergeant Stolp is wearing a gang sign and a desecration of the flag, pointing to the thin blue line flag on his chest. That's a fun idea, but that flag is considered a distinct flag from the flag of the United States, not a desecration of it. If you're going to make that argument, you might as well explain why the flag of Liberia isn't a desecration of the American flag. And if you can find that thin blue line flag on a list of recognized gang signs of criminal organizations in America distributed by a legitimate source, I'd love to see it. Otherwise, it's just an opinion, which you're entitled to, but technically, we can't do much about. Stolp and the other airmen remain generally friendly, in spite of the conduct of the filmers, which is always pretty great to see. I could talk about the filmers' insults all day, and how ridiculous they are, but it isn't really important. Now, if you're curious about all the things you're missing out on, here's an example.
There's a soda spill over in the inside the commissary, and we're going to need somebody to get a mop on that ASAP.
An airman by the name of Skinner walks away, talking on his radio, likely updating the desk sergeant, the patrol supervisor, and dispatch on the situation. Soon afterwards, a call comes over the radio, telling the airmen to detain the filmers. It appears that, based on what Skinner was able to relay over the radio, someone in a supervisory position confirmed that the filmers' actions met the criteria for a violation of 18 U.S.C. 795, and instructed the airmen to make the detention. Now here's something strange. When the airmen go to make the detention, the filmers ask what crime they are suspected of committing. Stolp says, "Right now, we're still working it out." Understandably, that raises some red flags. How can they detain someone if they don't know what they're detaining them for? Well, they don't really have to know if the order came from a supervisor who was able to establish probable cause that the crime had been committed. The airmen knew that filming the ACP was a prohibited action, but apparently didn't know the exact law that it came from. For those of you who have forgotten, the filmers were violating 18 U.S.C. 795, and in this case, 50 U.S.C. 797 as well. Fortunately, the supervisor knew, and since the supervisor was correct, the airman's actions didn't appear to violate anyone's rights. At 19 minutes and 37 seconds, one of the filmers stated that the Supreme Court had ruled that a detention can only last for 20 minutes. This is not true. This isn't even close to true. I have no idea where they're getting that from. But there's a chance I'm wrong. If I am wrong, and you can find that case law, I'll film myself yelling that I'm an idiot to strangers and lick a boot in front of them. Pretty good incentive, right? The airmen go to detain one of the filmers, and he backs away. Although he resists briefly and the airmen are required to physically overpower him to complete the detention, they continue to calmly talk to him and ensure his equipment remains undamaged. It's awfully kind of them. The filmer resists being handcuffed while the airmen tell him that he isn't under arrest, and he shouts, "I'm allowed to resist an unlawful detention." This is technically true, but in this case, the detention wasn't unlawful, so sorry. Now, there's also a part during this video where Olson points out that the female airman has her hand on her weapon. Now, that's a good attention to detail, but it doesn't really mean anything. I'm familiar with those holsters, and I would consider it impossible for her to draw the weapon from it with the way her hand was positioned. That's more of a weapons retention stance. After the filmer is detained, Olson is patted down without handcuffs. Understandably, the other filmer does not like this and asks why he has to be in handcuffs when Olson does not. If I had to guess, it's because Olson didn't put up nearly as much of a fight about it. Soon after, the first filmer is released, and he realizes that he had cut Skinner during the struggle. The filmer claims that because Skinner's blood is on him, Skinner has assaulted him with a deadly weapon. First, the blood got on the filmer because he resisted the detention, so it seems that he would actually be at fault. Second, unless the blood contained a disease with a very high mortality rate, it generally wouldn't be a deadly weapon. Third, Skinner didn't attempt to bleed on the filmer, so there's no intent, and an assault charge would not apply. Good try, though. Olson points out that he was never really asked to leave, so how could he be charged with trespassing? Well, he wasn't charged with trespassing. He was charged with entering property under military jurisdiction with the intent to commit a crime. Another good try, but not good enough. The other filmer claims that the Air Force policies don't apply to them because they're civilians. It's very important to be aware that when you're on federal property, under the jurisdiction of a military commander, this is not true. They can enforce federal and state law on you without any issues, so wrong again. But they're federal police, they can't enforce state law. Yes, they can, under the Assimilated Crimes Act. Olson also asks who the victim of this crime is, and that would be the United States government. Yes, they can be a victim. The idea that crimes require a victim to be crimes is not accurate. In fact, in the video description is a link to an article I wrote explaining that. You can also look forward to a video on it in the future, once First Amendment auditors stop getting arrested for filming military installations, and I can start focusing my attention on sovereign citizens. Eventually, both filmers were apprehended, and the charges against them were dropped. I don't know why. I talked to a criminal prosecutor about similar situations in which they had evidence a crime was committed, and the charges were never brought to court. And it turns out this isn't unheard of, and for a few reasons. One reason might be that the courtroom had too many cases to deal with. This one wasn't considered a high priority. Since the defendant had a lawyer and the court wasn't willing to drag a misdemeanor out for a very long time, the magistrate decided to drop it. Another reason might be because there is very little case law regarding filming a military installation, and the prosecutor didn't want to establish new case law that might make prosecuting this crime in the future more difficult. I've reached out to the court that dealt with this, and unfortunately I haven't received any new information about this incident, which is very frustrating. I'd like to get to the bottom of this as much as the rest of you, especially since I wrote a 6-page paper on this incident to prepare for the video. Single space, 11-point font, and Arial. I hope this information helped. And if there's anything that you take away from this video, I want it to be that just because the charges were dropped in this incident doesn't mean they'll be dropped for future instances. I would not recommend repeating this experiment. If I get more information on this, I will make a follow-up video. In the meantime, I recommend checking out Mr. Olson's video on his channel, Johnny50. If you enjoy his video, give him a like. If you like my video, hit that like button. Subscribe to me for more. Start arguments in my comments section. Send questions to my Twitter. And until the next time, be good, stay safe. I almost forgot. Johnny50 did not pass his audit. Not even close. Not only was he incredibly rude, he put out a lot of really bad information. I don't just mean information that was wrong. I also mean information that would be very detrimental to First Amendment auditors. So, yeah, he failed.